Okay, we'll call to order the Town of Truckee Planning Commission meeting for June 20th, 2023. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Gove.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Claren.
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Here. Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so we're going to start off as usual tonight with public comment. If anybody would like to make a public comment about anything that is not on tonight's agenda, please make your way up to the podium and state your name and let us know what's on your mind.
Is that going to include Tahoe Donner?
No, so this is for anything that's
Tahoe
not on the
Donner's
agenda.
no longer on the agenda? How does that work?
We'll cover that. But right now, this is public comment for anything that's not on the agenda. It is on the agenda, and we will get to that. Right now, this is public comment for anything that is not on the agenda. Okay. So seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. And move into item number 5, the appointment program for the selection of chair and vice chair. And we'll hand it over to staff to take over on this one.
Great. So this is pretty easy in the sense that you can throw out nominations. So we'll do chair first, and then after you've decided chair, we'll do vice chair second. So it works kind of similar to our regular agenda items where someone does a nomination and then you vote on that nomination. And then if you don't get enough votes, we'll go to another vote.
Can I nominate Chair Gov to be chair?
You can.
I do.
Great.
I do not accept the nomination. I would like to nominate Mr. Claren as chair.
Do you accept the nomination?
I will accept that nomination, yes.
Okay. Then we'll do a vote. So, Kaylee, you want to go ahead and call roll call for that?
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Gove.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman.
Sure.
Commissioner Claren.
Of course.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Yes. Commissioner Taylor.
Yes. Great. Then we have a new chair. So now we'll go for our vote for vice chair. Would someone like to throw out a nomination?
I'll nominate Dave Gove as coach.
I will accept
sure.
that
I'll second
nomination.
that.
Thank you.
Okay. Would we like to do a roll call for that one?
Commissioner Gove.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Claren.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Yes. Commissioner Taylor.
Yes. All right. With that, we're now going to change chairs. So 1 second so that Kaylee can also move the name placards. So while we have our new chair getting settled, we have a recommendation for you, which is to do the approval of the meeting minutes. And then once you've done that, we're going to ask that you consider changing the agenda order. To have the Tahoe Donner item moved up before the objective design standards.
Okay.
So our recommendation is to go ahead and consider the meeting minutes for May 16th.
What are you up to?
Number 6.
Number 6. Okay, so I'll need a motion from one of the commissioners to approve the minutes if they so desire.
So if you want to put your mic on, are you going to?
I have a couple minor changes.
Yeah, that's great.
So just with that, I can move on page 4, third paragraph. insert bulleted item, Phase 3 project was approved, third line toward the end, developers can essentially ask for virtually, not essentials ask for virtually. And then on page 5, last dark bullet in the upper section, try to get those foundations in, not founders, unless it was a lingo thing that I didn't catch. One last one. And then the deliberation on telecommunications facilities on page 8 of 18. Rather than handheld radios and hand radios, that should say ham in both places, please. And if we can make those changes, I will move to accept the minutes from our previous meeting.
So I'm hearing a motion with those amendments. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Is that correct, or is that somebody else's, John?
Nope, that's great. And then you
All
would just say-
opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Here we go. Okay.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we're messing with you a little bit tonight. Sorry about this, but because we want you to consider the Tahoe Donner item before the objective design standards, in part because our recommendation is to continue. So you do have members of the public here more for the Tahoe Donner item than the objective design standards. We thought that would be a good change for the agenda for you to consider. But if you want to do that, it would require a vote. If you want to keep it as it is, you don't have to vote.
So I'd be asking for a change in the agenda.
I'll motion that we change the agenda tonight
Thank you.
to see the, I don't have the agenda in front of me anymore because I lost it.
And the screens aren't up.
Yeah.
We can work on that. So it's for agenda item 9.1 to move that before 7.1.
Okay, I move to move agenda item 9.1 before agenda item 7.1.
I have a question of order, I guess, is that do we get to deliberate on whether or not I guess moving it doesn't matter. We still have to discuss whether or not we'd be postponing, even if we move the item earlier, correct? Okay.
Yes. Did I get a second? Did anybody second
I'll
that?
second that motion.
So discussion would be, I'm assuming now, making an assumption here, because this is a new setup for me, but we're going to just move it up, and then we're going to vote on if we're going to postpone it technically, correct? Yes. Does that answer your question? Okay, so I have a motion on the table.
I second.
Got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose, abstain? We're good to go. So that would make agenda item 9.1 up. So staff,
Thank you, Commissioners. This is the Tahoe Donner Downhill Ski Lodge Replacement Project. It's a development permit application. You've received the staff report and all the attachments related to the project. Since we released the project, we've received a number of public comments, and we have not had the time to respond to the public comments. And we'd like to take that time, and the applicant would also like to take that time to respond, if appropriate, to the public comment received. And with that, we as staff would like to recommend that the Planning Commission continue this agenda item to a date and time uncertain. Once we know what the date is, we'll renotice it and do our typical notice in the paper and to the neighbors. And then we'll work on responding to the public comment received with the help of the applicant. We also recommend that the Planning Commission extend the public comment period for the ISM&D, the CEQA document, to the end of the week, 5:00 p.m. on June 23rd, 2023, to give a little more time to give public comment on that item. So with that, I turn it over to you to discuss.
how does that affect public comment in the room tonight?
So you'll still want to open public comment. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when we do bring it back for the commission, we'll also open public comment at that time. So it provides additional opportunity. That's partly why we recommended that you hear this earlier in the agenda.
Another question, if somebody public comments tonight and we have another meeting, could that same person comment again?
Yes. Yep.
Does that help clear up for everybody? Coral?
No, I have questions. So I have to notice that by doing this earlier in the meeting, there may have been people who did not see the announcement this afternoon and may have expected to come here and maybe indeed be walking in here at 7, expecting to be able to comment. And I know that's a little awkward for them, us moving it earlier. But then I also had a question is, could you help me understand what is the nature of response to public comments from staff and the applicant? How does that typically happen? Do you issue another document, or what does that look like, please?
If there are no changes to the project between now and the next time we hear this project, it'll likely be in the form of a staff report where we'll respond item by item to the bigger issues that are identified in the public comments.
But also to speak to your concern about people showing up later in the meeting tonight, they will have an opportunity to make public comment at the next meeting, so it's not like they missed that opportunity.
Yeah, if we delay it, yeah.
The chair also has the option to open public comment again if you want. If you feel like people were expecting the item to be heard later in the evening, you have that discretion to just open it up again and say, I recognize that we changed the agenda.
And the applicant also requested the delay?
They agreed to the delay.
They agreed to it, okay.
All right, so are we voting?
So, yeah, I mean,
Staff to say why recommending continuance, open, close, motion to continue. All right.
what you want to do, though, too, is just make sure you do public comment. So typically you would do that first, and then you would take your vote.
And that's what I'm doing now. So we're going to open up to public comment for Tahoe Donner specifically. So for those of you that would like to have public comment, it's 3 minutes apiece. There's a timer up here that'll show you what time it is. I believe Kaylee's in charge of the timer. We do need you to state your name. Where they live? Do they need to state that?
No, it's helpful if you fill out one of the speaker cards that were on the back table just so that we spell your name correctly in our meeting minutes.
Okay, so with that, we're going to open up to public comment. So if you can line up against the wall and... You don't have to take the position, though. Not for you. You should turn around. Sorry.
It's red. Now it's green. Thanks. I'm Greg McDougall, past president of Tahoe Donner. Retired attorney, been up for 25 years, lived up there for an eternity. Aside from my point here in 3 minutes is to ask staff to address not only the issues set forth in the attached letters, which include asking the applicant who will resubmit, as well as the Planning Commission, to look at the traffic safety, evacuation, fire, housing issues, where these new people are going to all go, including here, and all the environmental issues set forth as attached experts' reports. But there's 2 legal issues that I think are really significant, and I bring them up only to counsel us to say be mindful of it. And one of them is a CUP, the conditional use report. Conditional use permit. We don't have one here. This lodge does not have one because we can't find it, as you know, and staff knows. So what does that mean? It means 2 things. It means, number one, you can't enforce legally any restrictions you put on that lodge without a CUP. And the reason for that is a CUP, as you saw in that legal brief, which was well drafted, I didn't do it, sets forth the facts that CUP sets the baseline for the usage of that property. If you don't have that, you have no comparison to determine the usage and the degree of difference between the applicant's proposal and what is already there. You don't have it. It's not set forth. So there's 2 reasons not to do that. And in fact, the law requires that you cannot have a mitigated declaration without a CUP for that very same reason. So I ask that we really consider that and take a look at it. And the other is, why wasn't an EIR required here? Because as the Planning Commission well knows, the law requires an EIR for any project that may capitalized may, have a significant environmental impact. We know that. Okay. So what does may mean under the law? It's defined as a low threshold test. Low. That's case law and statutory law. Now, can you say, with all these reports filed, with all these experts, that threshold wasn't met? You can only deny an ERR only if there is no credible evidence of an impact on the environment. So we ask ourselves and ask council for the town, why wasn't an EIR here required? And secondly, why there's no CUP? Thank you.
My name is Roland Lee. I'm a retired battalion chief, San Francisco Fire. Retired about 20 years, and I do other things now. I've had a second home up in Tahoe Donner since the year 2000. I bought it new. I just got word of this stuff today about this council meeting. Came up yesterday to clear the trees, and I clear trees every year, 25 trees on my lot, and I asked the forestry to, hey, give me one report so I don't have to keep going back to a person that cuts trees down to give me a bid every year. And we went the beginning of last year, the beginning of the year before, and the last day of the season, and here they are marking trees again. And when there's a fire, they leave the big trees, which is a fire low, which is going to catch the property on fire. I've been to fires. I don't think the forestry department has been to fires. I've been to fires. I grew up and down California. Okay, it's bad. You're taking a tree that's a sapling 3 feet high, and you're not cutting down the ones that are 2 feet apart, which are, 20 inches around. But the point I'm getting to is this is a last minute boondoggle. I just found out about this meeting, and I looked at the agenda. You got an 18-page agenda, which I just wrote a response this morning because I got an email. So I happened to be up here, so I better go to the meeting today to say what I feel. I'm totally against enlarging something that was not previously approved. If you're changing plans, you've got to change the plans. You've got to redo the whole thing again. It's wrong. It has the whole Tahoe Donner in conflict. We have enough conflict in the U.S. already, but now you have a conflict within the subdivision. That's really dumb. And it got me so mad, I'm ready to sell the place because I can stay at the hotel at Squaw Valley. I can stay there. I don't care if it's $3,000. I can spend less money at the house than I can stay at the hotel and have change in my pocket. I'm 75 years old. I like going skiing. I would not use that ski area. It's a two-lift operation, and they're hiring from what I understand, a developer from Vail who builds world-class ski resort. That is not a world-class ski resort. I wouldn't ski there if you paid me $300 a day. That's all I got to say, but that's not enough time. You should have copies of 18 pages you're talking about today. I'm taking pictures and trying to hurry up and play catch-up. That's like going to a fire. I'm not prepared. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
It's wrong to do it rush stuff.
Good afternoon, Jeff Shelato. I think, Mr. Claren, you know my brother Mike. I've been a Tahoe Donner homeowner for 10 years. My family built a cabin up in Tahoe Donner in 1973, so I have a connection to the community. It goes back 50 years and before the town incorporated. I want to express, I'm speaking just on behalf of myself, but I'm part of a ad hoc group called Tahoe Donner Change, and one of my neighbors and friends here, Cheryl Cross Powell, will address some of those concerns, but I want to support the postponement of the hearing in substance today. I think there's enough engineering, environmental, and legal issues that I think it deserves the time, especially in considering some of the comment letters that I'm familiar with that were submitted by the Tahoe Donner Change Group's legal counsel, hydrologist they employ to review the project, and as well as a letter that I'm aware of from the Center for Biological Diversity. I think these letters need to be taken into account, as well as all the input that was provided both for the mitigated neg deck, as well as just general comments that people can submit to Planning Commission, and I'm supportive of replacing the lodge, and I was part of the General Planning Committee that reviewed this for 2 years before it was abolished. That is the committee, and I support it, but not the project that's before you today. I think it needs some changes, and I can't support the way as it stands now. But I'm pleased, and I support that you're going to take more time to do it carefully, and I appreciate being able to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Cross Powell. Thank you for considering the concerns of a large group of homeowners within Tahoe Donner that have with the currently planned downhill ski lodge rebuild and expansion. My main concerns, and those of many others within the subdivision, are concerns regarding the increased disturbed underground water due to extensive foundation and excavation depth increases, with the plans as drawn requiring foundational excavation to a depth of 10 to 12 feet and moving the foundation forward towards the Eagle Rock lift. That would require extensive digging into the hillside. And as the NV5 report that was put out by Tahoe Donner showed water in subsurface, 3 of 4 subsurface corings at a depth of 6 to 8 feet in an extremely dry drought year. Current plans show a drainage surface water remediation plan, but no subsurface water surveys were done in that area to determine what potential water lenses that you are disturbing in that area. And again, the hydrogeologist report that was we hired in order to look at the plans as presented showed that the mitigation that is proposed is as we go along and as we see it, rather than surveying the actual flows underneath and knowing what's there before you start. So the next area that we are concerned with is increased drainage and disturbance of the underground water lenses, which may potentially increase flows and sediments into the Alter Creek drainage with its impact to fish and wildlife populations. Protecting our natural resources is our responsibility for future generations, and limiting habitat disturbance due to development is a key to achieving that goal. And the third item is as Greg went over before, there is no conditional use permit defining the current usage for the facility with its traffic and parking impacts, and no predicted increases in the usage and traffic areas, even though the facility as projected is 60% larger. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's your time.
I know.
Sorry,
I understand.
For having this commission hearing. Trish Hackermack. I currently live across from the Downhill Ski Lodge, and in the month of August I'll be moving to Glacier Way, which is above the Downhill Ski Lodge. So I'm definitely concerned about any event noise concerns, but I'm just going to basically read you what I wrote in already, because I doubt that you guys have all heard that. So like the majority of Tahoe Donner members who voted in January of 2022, I oppose the size of this replacement project. I'm not opposed to the replacement, it's just the size, right? So the new lodge is too big for the site and the current usage. The design and size indicate that the unspoken plan for the building is for season usage. The Tahoe Donner Association should have to obtain an enforceable conditional use permit, common theme here, for the current usage of the site. As a close neighbor, I'm concerned about the noise and traffic of a four-season event center and a large restaurant. Parking and traffic during the ski season are awful for the 4 months of the year. I dread living with these same problems all year long. I'm concerned about the much larger footprint of this new lodge and that it will require excavation of 12 to 13 feet below the existing surface and adjacent hillside. The depth could really impact the shallow groundwater, from what I understand. And I also worry about the risk of flooding and drainage issues from all that work, right? And I think that could potentially, of course, affect our property values. The potential wastewater and sediment discharge due to the excavation could impact our beautiful Alder Creek. Of course, there are threatened species that could also be impacted. And, you know, where will all this wastewater really go? It's not clear to me. And last point, what would the ramifications be if the replacement plans were subject to the standards, environmental requirements, goals, and policies of Truckee 2040? I suspect the plans would not meet those requirements and goals. I'm concerned that the current Tahoe Donner plans are not subject to the well-thought-out long-term view of Truckee 2040. Anyway, I sincerely hope the town of Truckee rejects this proposed lodge as currently planned. We need a replacement, but nothing on the scale this grand. So anyway, thank you for your time and look forward to next steps.
Thank you, Trish.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Connors, and I've been a resident of Truckee for 25 years. Like two other people in this room, I'm a former president. I'm a former treasurer. Mitch, we've worked together in the past. There's also 3 people from the Planning Commission that are here before it was dissolved. So I'm not going to repeat all the things that you've just heard, except to say I actively agree that the homework has not been done, and the conditions that have been put forth aren't necessarily the real conditions. So I agree with those comments. So I do have a question, but it's for Mitch. And Mitch, you've been actively involved in Tahoe Donner in a similar type role. And do you have the ability to remain unbiased? Right, because you've settled lots of cases and you've done a terrific job. But the question to me is there a conflict with you? And I'm not saying there is or there isn't, but I think it's something that a 5-person board needs to consider, number one. My second point, which is my naivete, is I understand that the comments were still open and a recommendation was made. And I don't know how a recommendation could have been made if the comment period was still open. And again, maybe I'm missing something on how things work, but if that's the case, I think it was grossly unfair not to listen and think through all the comments. So that's only 2 minutes, and I'll take no more of your time, except this is a really important decision. The residents of Truckee have voted on this and are not in favor of it, but yet the board continues. So without going into some of the technical stuff, which some of my colleagues have done, the residents do not want this. Thank you.
Chair Claren, just for clarification for you, usually you can just address public comment collectively once you've heard it all.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Henry Byer. I'm a full-time Tahoe Donner resident. I'm also a registered California geophysicist, and so I was particularly interested in this very recent June 19th report by Greg Kamen, a registered California hydrologist. If they sound like very different disciplines, well, a lot of my work in geophysics, first half of my career was involved in trying to develop resources to generate geothermal energy, which involves a lot of hydrology. Second half of my career has been related to climate change and geologic storage of carbon dioxide to keep it out of the atmosphere. Once again, it involves a lot of hydrology. Yet I'm not trying to present myself as an authority on foundation and shallow hydrology, which is discussed in Greg Kamen's report. However, I read it. In fact, I printed out the technical part of it. I think he makes some excellent points. They're well thought out, and they present some various concerns. They've been discussed by other people this evening before, so I just want to quote a sentence or two here in his report. When combining subsurface drainage discharge with surface stormwater runoff, the total flow leaving the site may exceed the town of Truckee requirements to treat and infiltrate the 85th percentile. An analysis of potential impacts on water quality, erosion, flooding, and effects on the receiving water environment have not been evaluated and should be considered incomplete until these impacts are evaluated. So, as I said, I think his comments are well thought out, well presented, and they do indicate that more work should be done regarding drainage in and around the site. Thank you very much.
My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm a resident of Tahoe-Donner, and I have a little historical perspective, I think, here. 40 years ago, when I bought my house in Tahoe-Donner, and I took my kids to the ski area, I never noticed any crowding at all. 25 years later, when I entered the lodge at lunchtime on a weekend or holiday, I had to step over people to get from the entrance to the bathroom. Now, 15 years later, as Tahoe-Donner has continued to grow, the situation is even worse. 10 years ago, I was asked to be a member volunteer on a committee to analyze the ski area to see what member needs were. When we examined the lodge, we discovered that many building codes had changed over almost 50 years since the lodge was built. And most critical of this was the American Disabilities Act. In addition to the temporary yurt, which was not really very effective as a way to operate our ski school and is not consistent with the ski area that's billed as the best place to begin. We engaged 3 building contractors to propose a remodel of the current space, and we're told in detail why this was impractical and not cost effective. For one thing, ADA compliance requires wider hallways, bigger bathrooms, less steep stairs and ramps, and an elevator. All these things require more space. Additionally, if we wanted to incorporate the yurt for efficiency and cost saving, the building, without any other changes, grows to over 19,000 square feet. And we still have an old, high-maintenance structure that sheds snow on the deck and over an essential emergency exit and is 20 feet below the ski hill. A 6-year-old beginner with ski boots on for the first time must climb this slippery hill carrying awkward skis and poles. Again, this is not consistent with the mission of a ski area catering to beginners. One former board member tried to help by bringing in his expert remodel consultant from the Bay Area. After a 2-hour tour, the consultant's opinion was, bulldoze it. Pretty clear. Over the next 2 years, we made a lot of measurements of usage of the ski area, how many people came there, etc. And we defined a detailed needs analysis that assumed no increase in users or parking and no events such as weddings. That was the design constraint. 2 firms who are worldwide experts in building ski areas did preliminary designs and recommended buildings of 35,000 and 29,000 square feet. With a third design firm, we created a team of a designer, a builder, and our staff, and were able to value engineer a 24,000 square foot structure that we believe will deliver a satisfactory user experience with manageable sacrifices. That design is what you have today.
Mike, that's your time. Thank you.
Chair, if I may. I want to remind people to fill out a comment card with their name so that it can be added to the record.
So I'll remind you all to fill out a card with your name for the record. Any further comment? I saw some people walk in later on in the back. John? No? Yes.
By the way, I was the board member who brought in the consultant. I brought in a second consultant, which was the head of.
State your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Charles Wu.
Thank you.
I was another president of Tahoe Donner. I brought in, a second person who, my understanding, he was actually the ex-president of, well, actually, the whole point is not to talk about, whether we need a ski lodge or whether we don't need a ski lodge or, I think everybody has mentioned that they would prefer to replace it from that standpoint. The question that we're looking at is this an appropriate building? Is it an appropriate size? Is it, have we done our homework in terms of environmental? Is it treated like any other commercial building that is to be built in Tahoe Donner? Because it's not just for the members, it's for everybody, meaning we have people come in from the public to use our ski hill. And it's a commercial enterprise. And so if it's, what I don't understand quite is that I heard about the 2040 general plan. I've been reading about how we're trying to get away from tourism and how to diversify our economy here. And so then the question then becomes, is this something that is if it's not part of the 2040 plan, then, where does it fit? And how should we be measuring it in what form? Because this is a commercial enterprise. You have to look at it as such. We're operating it as such, and we need to work with the town of Truckee to make sure we're doing all the things that you would normally do if I was to build a commercial building downtown. Quite frankly, from what I understand, you probably say, go build some affordable housing too on top of that. I don't know what the pieces of the equation are, but that is, that's my perspective as I look at it, is that this is not a replacement lodge as I see in the documents, because we're making it a whole lot bigger in a lot of ways, and we're doing that because to meet the business needs of Tahoe Donner, as opposed to, and to bring in more people. And is that something that the town wants to do? And how does that fit in? So it's really the commercial side that that I hadn't heard about, that I'd like to emphasize to the planning committee in terms of you looking at the town of Truckee as a whole and dealing with the traffic issues and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Any other public comment? Everybody filled out their card, right? Good. All right, I'm going to close public comment at this time. All right, so we had talked about a motion to continue. Well, first off, do we want to comment on public comment? Does anybody want to respond to any of that? Coral's laughing at me. Shall I respond to Jeff Connors? So, that's okay. You caught me off guard, Jeff. Conflict of interest with me specifically has been discussed ad nauseum behind the scenes in public. In this winter, I don't do much architectural standards. I haven't seen this project come in front of me as an architectural standards member, nor have I made any public comments about it, either way, if it's good, bad, what have you. So I think with that determination, it was decided that I didn't have a conflict of interest. So it was discussed to a big degree. And then we didn't make the recommendation to postpone, we just talked about it. So we're going to talk about that now. Beyond that, I think I need to say, I'm just going to throw out there that it's not the town of Truckee or the citizens. It's not the town of Truckee that voted yes or no on Tahoe Donner's vote. It was Tahoe Donner members. So when Tahoe Donner submits an application to us as a planning commission and members of the town of Truckee planning department, the cost to build it is immaterial. And I know you're not going to like this, but the size, it has something to do with, but if it's within the legal boundaries of the property that's it's being put on, it came to us at the size that it is. So if the size isn't happy, if you people aren't happy with the size, that needs to go back to your board, and your board needs to submit something to us that's the size that you all like, that you all vote on. We have to make sure that the size of the building environmentally and all the other regulations fit the town of Truckee's rules, regulations, and codes, not Tahoe Donner's. So there was a lot of talk about a vote, 49 or 44%. I saw through the letters, and I'm not really sure what that vote was. I don't remember voting on that as a Tahoe Donner member. So I'm not really sure what that is, but it really is immaterial to what our jobs are as Town of Truckee Planning Commissioners. We're not Tahoe Donner representatives. We're Town of Truckee representatives. Is that correct? Did I say that properly? Okay. So there's a talk of postponement. I don't know if we've ever actually made a motion. Has anybody actually made a motion for that?
No, we were going to deliberate on that first.
So we'll deliberate on it first. I was going to open it up for discussion afterwards. Do you have any comments? I know Coral does, so I'll start with Dave and I'll go to Coral next.
I mean, my comment would be that I'd be in favor of continuing this item, considering that the applicant agreed to the continuation. So, and then we don't have a staff presentation ready to go, so it doesn't seem like there's any other route.
Coral?
I just want to also concur that we do need to keep in mind that what's not before us is the size or the nature of this building. It's coming to us as it is. That's been decided through a long process by the Tahoe Donner Board. Is this the time to disclose, or is that at another time?
You can disclose now if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a Tahoe Donner resident. I'm a Tahoe Donner employee. I can walk to the site, the project site, in about 10 minutes from my home. 7 if I hurry. And I have been receiving emails on this topic and have studied the web pages on this topic for years. The public information campaign has been going on for years, and the public involvement campaign among Tahoe Donner members has been going on for years. So I have read a lot of material this. I have talked to Tahoe Donner staff about this because I had questions about it. And people in Tahoe Donner talk to me and want to tell me their opinions on it. Obviously, there's a lot of opinions on this, and I have also followed this saga on Nextdoor. So I think that if the applicant has agreed to postpone this in the hopes that there can be a well thought out response to some of the overwhelming amount of public comment that's come in, and I hope that that is to the applicant's good, that they have that opportunity, then I could see postponing it. But otherwise, you know, we have been provided the information, we've been provided the documents. I came prepared, but if the applicants agreed to it and there's an advantage for everyone to see some responses to the concerns that have been brought up, I could see postponing it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's necessary, but I wasn't privy to the conversations between the staff and the applicant.
Thank you. Dan?
I guess, quick question. If we said yes to this project, Tahoe Donner, it's still up to them to decide if they want to build this thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
That's
you hit-
my understanding,
You hit the nail
yes.
on the head. Like, it's not up to us to opine on the size or the cost or that stuff. Like, if it meets the rules and the zoning requirements, then it is what it is.
That's correct. And it's happened many times before and will happen again in the future. There could be a process. We can look at this and spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of time to finally come to an agreement, approve it, and then the applicants say, you know what, we don't want to build it. We're going to come back with something else. And then they can start all over again. Is that correct? So, yes, you are 100% correct, Dan.
And it's my understanding is one of our roles is really to decide whether or not the mitigated neg deck document, we accept that. Because if we accept that, then it would lead to us saying, yes, we are willing to say yes to the development permit. That's our role, not the appropriateness.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the environmental review, and then you're looking at the findings. So it's sort of the two components. If you felt like you didn't have enough information, then you would obviously continue it. And if you felt like you could make those findings and that you didn't see any impacts, then you would take a different action. So those are really the focus for you guys.
Tammy?
I'm in favor of continuing this. I feel like giving the project applicant more time to respond to public comment may be in their best interest and provide us with more information to make a better decision that may allow this to move forward in a way that is acceptable to everybody, or at least hopefully more acceptable. And if they are in favor with that, then I think we should do it. Although I don't want to prolong this too far into the future. I feel like this is something that has been worked on for years and needs to have some sort of resolution. So let's just keep that in mind, hopefully, and we can work with the applicant to bring this back sooner rather than later.
Of course, out of our control. But appreciate the verbalization of such. All right, so it sounds like we're all in agreement. I need a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission continue agenda item 9.1 to a date and time uncertain, and that we extend the public comment period for the initial study neg deck to the end of the week, 5 p.m., June 23rd, 2023.
Is there any second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion, Coral?
Yes, I have discussion. I would like to ask staff, do we want to do a date uncertain just because you want to have an adequate amount of time to help prepare this? Otherwise, can we just put it at our next meeting?
We want to have adequate, we don't want to rush if there's need to bring in some experts or, to review our comments.
Yeah, I would say there's some pretty big issues that were brought up, and do it right the first time instead of fixing it later.
I mean,
Roll
it
call,
seems-
please. Is that it? Are you
Well,
done with
it seems
discussion?
plausible we might not actually see this project again in its current form.
Right. That's right.
Outside
Which
of
is
our control.
Outside of our control, but like let Tahoe Downer support their project in some factor before we review it.
Roll call, please.
Chair Claren?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gove?
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you all. You're more than welcome to watch us discuss the next item on the agenda.
Chair Claren, just a formality, but when we do a motion, we'll have you say it out loud that it passed and that there were none opposed.
Motion passed with none opposed. Like that? Okay.
Didn't have to switch the agenda.
I didn't take that personal, Jeff. It's all good. All good. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along. Agenda item number 7.1 is objective design standards. Oh, wait a second.
Okay.
Ready? Okay, agenda item 7.1 is objective design standards. Number one, staff presentation, Yumi, please.
Good evening again, commissioners. Thanks for being here. This process of creating objective design standards has been in the works since 2019 when our current housing element was adopted with an action that the town would create these objective design standards to respond to the requirements of state legislation. We also talked about creating objective design standards quite a bit throughout the general plan update process. And in order to implement these actions, in April 2021, we obtained grant funding through the state to hire a consultant to design workshop, who's right behind you. to help us through this complex process. After an auditing process of our current codes and design guidelines, along with community outreach that we'll describe in this presentation, we released the draft objective design standards for public review earlier this month. The purpose of this meeting is to learn about why we're going through this process and getting feedback as we move forward towards adoption of these standards. Something important to remember throughout this process, we think that this will be a living document. All of these standards will continue to change over time as we revisit and amend the development code, as you've seen last meeting with an intense review of all the development code standards that we're revising. As we find out what works and doesn't work, what our community likes, and as our community changes over time. So I thank everyone that has provided public comment and edits thus far in our with the draft objective design standards, and we'll continue to look at them and incorporate them, but they have not yet been incorporated in the current iteration of the objective design standards tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Callie and Jessica with Design Workshop, who are our consultants on this item.
Great. Thank you so much, Yumi. My name is Jessica Garrow. I'm a principal with Design Workshop, and I'm joined by Callie New, an associate with our team, and we're going to run through the objective design standards presentation for you tonight. We've been working with Yumi and her team for about 2 years and are excited to be in this stage of the process. In terms of agenda for tonight, we will be going through a little bit of the background, discussing project and community engagement, a summary of those objective design standards, and then working towards next steps and what is the path forward. So in terms of background and the purpose, why are we here? The state of California passed a series of laws that require multifamily development projects to be reviewed against objective design standards. The legislation was intended to help address the statewide housing shortage and support development of multifamily and mixed-use developments. While they require updated design standards, the intent is to allow individual local governments to create customized standards that fit their community. And from a process perspective, that state legislation seeks to ensure clear requirements and streamline the overall review process. So what are objective design standards? What has the state required of our communities? So the state legislation requires that all residential projects that I'll cover in the next slide be reviewed against these objective design standards. Those are things that are measurable, verifiable, and mandatory. They use specific dimensions to describe different requirements, and they use language like shall and must. Subjective design standards, on the other hand, tend to be more vague, and they also tend to be optional. They require more interpretation and use words like should. So an example is stating that a setback should be in line or consistent with neighborhood character. That is a subjective standard, while identifying a specific setback number of at least 15 feet and up to 20 feet is an objective standard that is very measurable. So that is a key difference. And so as we go through and describe what some of the proposed code changes are, you'll see that we're using more objective, these measurable, verifiable standards. So the objective design standards will apply to multifamily developments, including townhomes, apartments, and condominiums, as well as duplexes and triplexes and mixed-use developments. New single-family subdivisions are also subject to the requirements. An individual single-family home would not be, but a new subdivision would be. In terms of the review process, state law requires that multifamily residential projects be reviewed at the staff level. And so these, as a part of the objective design process, it creates a new review process that is administrative. The town is proposing language that would allow an applicant to choose the option of using a more flexible path that relies on design guidelines and community feedback, but the town cannot require that an applicant do that. So if the developer chooses that more flexible path where it is more design guidelines with more subjective standards. Projects with 11 or more units or that include 26,000 square feet of disturbance or more would be reviewed by the Planning Commission, which has historically been that review pathway. Importantly, all other reviews, like environmental review, are unchanged and would still be required. So even if a project's going through that administrative review for the objective design standards, other reviews may still be required. So really quickly, high-level project overview. Design Workshop and the town of Truckee have been working together since 2021 on this project, as Yumi said, funded through a state grant. The process began with review of existing design standards and the town's plans. We completed community engagement activities and then incorporated that into draft documents. Prior to this meeting, the full draft was shared with the community. And as we move forward in hearing public feedback, as well as your feedback tonight, we'll move to update that code language and try to finalize that towards adoption. So in terms of community engagement, we completed a detailed survey in the fall of 2021 and then held a series of focus group conversations on some interim drafts. And I'm first going to really quickly cover the survey and some high-level topics that were identified there by the community. So as I said, the survey was completed in November of 2021, and we heard about all the key priorities listed here, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on these next slides. So the first we heard was environmental considerations, that the environment is really important to the town of Truckee and the community, and that really needs to be taken into account within the objective design standards. So some of the top considerations that were identified through that survey by the community were the importance of wildfire-resistant construction, preservation of open space and environmentally sensitive areas, green building and energy-efficient construction, as well as low-impact development. In terms of architectural character, we heard that design should really reflect the mountain character of Truckee. We heard about Truckee funk quite a bit within the survey, and that is something that we tried to incorporate into the standards. We also heard that it's important that the housing products be affordable to the renter or purchaser. Most residential types were identified as appropriate in the town. So that includes attached townhomes, single-family homes, duplexes, tiny homes, and apartments. And then we finally heard that clustering development was important for neighborhood character. In terms of building orientation and articulation, the top considerations were screening parking areas, having articulation in buildings, using primarily gable and shed roof forms, as well as A-frame, and then having buildings that are set back from the streets, again, kind of reinforcing that mountain character. We did hear a few other key priorities from the community. Color and materials was important. There was a focus in that feedback on using more natural materials as well as earth tone colors. And there were comments about the importance of connecting development to the community through bike and pedestrian infrastructure, while also providing parking for the housing units. So from the survey, we then worked through some draft language and shared that with focus groups, and we met with them late 2021 and into the spring of 2022. And there we did a number of iterations with them and reviewed specific code language and options with them. And we've shared interim drafts with them since for additional feedback. And one of the things that is really important that kind of came out of that feedback was providing some options for people. While it's important to have objective design standards that are clear and measurable, that maybe having a standard that says you must meet 3 out of these 5 options. So providing that flexibility, if you will, within that objective framework was something that we heard from them and tried to incorporate. I'm going to turn it over to Callie, and she's going to run through some of the specific design standards.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. So just to reiterate what residential projects are affected by this work. So new multifamily residences would include 2 or more units or a mix of multifamily units. New mixed-use projects that contain over 2/3 of the floor area that's designated for residential uses. And then in single-family subdivisions, new single-family subdivisions, so more than one unit that's being proposed in a subdivision. So existing multifamily or mixed-use residences, existing single-family residences or single-family subdivisions are not affected by these standards. And then new single-family homes that are not part of a subdivision are also not affected by this code update. So I'm going to first go through the multifamily residences standards and then move into the single-family standards because they do differ a little bit. And so you can follow along. These are the sections that are affected these are the standards that are contained within the code update. And so you can follow along. The section number will also be listed at the top of the screen as I'm going through this overview. So in terms of site design, the goal of this is really to create wall edges to support walkability, and then also to create access to open space through providing common open areas. So this is achieved through requiring that buildings are oriented to the street edge and building walls are parallel to the front setback line for at least 50% of the property frontage. There's exemptions to this. If the zoning doesn't require setbacks, then the building shall be within 10 feet of the property line unless landscaping improvements require further setback. Developments must group residential structures to preserve contiguous open space areas, and then buildings should be grouped as well to create courtyards and or common open space areas. To maximize privacy, windows and entrances should be positioned so as to avoid different living spaces facing each other. For circulation, these requirements address development siting within the overall circulation system, and there's really a focus on the pedestrian. So application shall connect on-site pedestrian circulation system to the off-site public sidewalk or trails at intervals of at least one connection for each 200 linear feet of building frontage. So really making sure that the development ties into the existing pathways or sidewalks. Parking shall connect to the primary building entrances via walkways with pavers or concrete slab. And parking must be located behind buildings and screened from streets and sidewalks. Parking cannot be located between the primary building entrance and the street. Surface lots, carports, and parking structures are limited in size and regulated by design and landscaping standards. And parking that is attached to residential structures must follow the design of the structure through the use of materials, colors, and architectural details. Common outdoor areas are defined as usable outdoor space that's designed or programmed for recreation and leisure. So all projects with 5 or more units must provide a minimum of 250 square feet of common outdoor areas per dwelling unit. This space excludes rights-of-way vehicle access, parking, or parking landscaping. So the common outdoor area really has to be intentional. It may include paved or hard surfaces for recreation. An example of that would be a basketball court or a swimming pool. If hard surfaces are provided, it may count for up to 25% of the required common outdoor area. So it cannot be the entire common outdoor area. Up to 50% of the common outdoor area can count toward the required open space calculation, which is defined in Chapter 18.46. So in other words, of the 250 square feet that's required, half of that, or 125 square feet, may count toward the percentage requirement for open space. Up to 50% of required rear setbacks can be credited toward the common outdoor areas when they are at least 20 feet in all dimensions. And common indoor-outdoor recreation amenities are required for every 25 units. And so an example of that would be a barbecue area, a recreation building, a fenced dog area, an indoor-outdoor sport court, or children's play equipment. For private outdoor spaces, all units are required to provide a private outdoor space through at least one balcony, patio, or deck that's 48 square feet or larger. Balconies must be partially covered, and balconies and decks are required to be fenced. Fences and railings for balconies, porches, and decks are required to be 50% transparent and use metal, wood, cable, or other materials found on the building. In terms of amenities, shared laundry is provided for buildings with 5 or more units, unless each unit includes that as a private amenity. And at least 60 square feet of storage is provided per unit, excluding bedroom closets. Massing and articulation standards aim to ensure that buildings are designed to reduce their overall perceived scale and to add visual interest that's consistent with Truckee's character. So with these standards, the length of facades and elevations is limited to less than 200 feet unless they are within 10 feet of an adjacent structure and of the same or lesser height of that structure. So they are required to be broken up, and that can be achieved through changes in wall plane. And changes in wall plane occur that are a minimum of 20% of the width of the building elevation and are either recessed or extended above the maximum height of the building. So just a portion of the wall plane is either recessed or extended. Changes in height can occur with variation. That's a minimum of 80% of the maximum height of the building frontage for a minimum width of 20% of the building elevation. So in other words, and using simple math that probably, that might not make sense, but if you had a 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot building, at least 2 feet of the front elevation would have a 12 foot or an 8 foot roof height. So it would be above or below for a section of that wall plane. Facade breaks occur at least every 50 feet via via building offsets. So this can be done through entryway accent materials, material variations, or changes in direction of materials, or wainscoting. And then there's an incremental requirement that happens as more units per building are added. So projects with 3 to 5 units per building are required to have at least 2 projections or recesses along the building frontage. 6 to 9 units per building have to have at least 3 projections or recesses along the building frontage. And then buildings that have 20 or more units need to have at least 3 projections or recesses, or they could be separated into more than one building. Buildings that are 2 or more stories are required to provide a 3-foot canopy, roof, or balcony that covers the building entry. And for buildings that are 3 stories or higher, this 3rd story is required to be stepped back at least 10 feet from the ground floor setback. So it has that kind of step back that you can see on the diagram there. So roof requirements, roofs are required to be made of thick or dimensional shingles and dark earth tones. Roof forms are allowed to be shed or gable, and that includes gambrel, hip, clipped, gable, and A-frame roofs. Snow retention is encouraged through snow fences and composition shingles. And then there are requirements to mitigate snow falling on adjacent properties and sidewalks. Flat roofs are prohibited except on mixed-use developments that are larger than 10,000 feet. And buildings that are wider than 25 feet are required to have roof line variations. So an example of that would be a change in roof pitch, form, or height. Private entries can be provided on the exterior of the ground floor or internally via a common entry. Buildings with common entries only shall provide a minimum 10-foot square window with views of on-site amenities such as landscaping or recreational facilities within that common entry. All entries must have a roof overhang or canopy and a stoop, as well as a minimum 6 square feet of landscaping with at least 1 tree and 3 shrubs. For buildings with shared entries, these must be provided along all street-facing elevations. Secondary shared entrances can be provided on other facades, such as those that are internal to the block or site and provide access to common areas or a parking facility. And projects on corner lots are required to engage both streets by providing entrances on both street-facing elevations. Feedback from the community really reflected a desire to allow earth tones and specific materials that convey that Truckee funk architecture. So an example of those would be those that are made from natural elements. Up to 2 base color shades, tones, or tints are allowed, and up to 2 accent colors are allowed that cover up to 10% of the building. That 10% threshold is reduced to 5% if a bright accent color is used for the accent color. Neon fluorescent pink, purple, and yellow color is prohibited, and bright colors are allowed in larger amounts than that 5% if the building is in the historic district. Use of at least 2 high-quality materials that withstand long-term weathering, such as wood, metal, stone, concrete, steel, fiber cement board, reclaimed materials, etc., are required. And we'd also like to consider mitigation measures for wildfire and building materiality, and know that there are continual advances to technology in this area. So this is something that we are hoping to discuss in the Q&A today. For windows and doors and exterior stairs, mixed-use buildings are required to have at least 65% glass on the ground floor. Windows are required at least every 15 feet on street-facing walls, and are required to consume 15% of the overall facade, including second floor of mixed-use buildings consist of windows or transparent doors, except for on sides facing adjacent property lines. Tinted or reflective glass is prohibited, and exterior stairwells are required to be screened and covered. Utilities in a utility room, they must be in a utility room or in enclosed cabinets. Ground-mounted utilities are required to be combined and out of sight, out of view from public rights-of-way or open space. And then waste and service areas, when possible, are required to be accessed from alley or side streets and fitted with wildlife-resistant containers and/or enclosures. Okay. Moving on to new single-family subdivisions. So again, these are the section references, and then you can see those at the top of the screen as well as I'm going through these requirements. So in terms of building massing and articulations, homes, including attached garages, are a maximum of 45 feet deep, and detached accessory buildings are required to be located at least 8 feet from the primary building. Homes are a maximum 50 feet wide without a break in the homes are a maximum of 50 feet wide without a break in the plane. So there could be it could be wider if a break in the plane is provided, and a break would be provided through a change in roof line, form, or projection. Detached accessory buildings are required to be at least 5 feet narrower than the primary home. So an example would be a garage. Garages are 1 story and less than 12 feet tall. However, 1-story living areas are permitted above garages. So they can go above that 1-story limit. And homes are required to have a human scale feature on the ground floor, such as a projection, a recess, or a 1-story step down, which is shown in the diagram on the screen. Subdivisions that are 5 or more homes are required to use at least 3 building designs with different roof materials, types, heights, materials, and color. The more homes that are proposed within the application, the more designs that are required. Entry features, including the main entrance, is required to be located on the front facade facing the street. Fences, hedges, walls, and other structures cannot obstruct the primary entrance visibility, so you need to be able to see the front door from the front of the building, from the sidewalk or the road. Street-facing facades are required to have at least 1 4x4 window, and then lots with access to an alley or private street need to provide access to the garages from that alley or private street. And then finally, in terms of materiality, 2 high-quality materials that withstand long-term weathering are required, and that's similar to the multi-family developments.
Okay, I'll take over from here. In addition to the Objective Design Standard chapter, the town did an audit of all of our other development code requirements, and we realized that there are a few areas in other chapters that needed to be revisited to remove some subjectivity. So we're proposing to update some of those standards to make them objective and to remove potential for interpretation or discretion of a design standard. So the areas that we're looking at as part of this update is we're looking at height standards, removing discretion and exploring new height measurements, and this would impact existing single-family homes in existing subdivisions. So this is one area where it kind of deviates from that original discussion about how the Objective Design Standards chapter does not apply to Tawadana or Glenshire. We are looking at coming up with a new definition of how height is measured based off of council's direction through the general plan update process. We're also proposing to update our hillside development standards to specifically prohibit development on slopes 30% or greater. Right now, it allows for Planning Commission to have that discretion, but with discretion comes subjectivity, so we're removing that component. We're also proposing to update our open space and clustering requirements for just new small subdivisions specifically, so that we have a clear idea of where we want contiguous open space in those smaller subdivisions. We're also proposing wetland standards. Right now, we don't have a set requirement or setback or fencing standard for wetland projects near wetlands, so we're proposing that be incorporated into the development code as part of this update. And then we're also proposing standards for ADUs in the historic district. So this is also another area where that existing subdivisions discussion doesn't apply. We want to look at how ADUs in the historic district we want to continue to make sure that ADUs in the historic district are compatible with the historic preservation themes of our downtown Truckee plan. So we're proposing some updates to that section of our development code. And then we're also proposing some minor changes to our affordable housing ordinance. Right now, we just say our affordable housing units need to be compatible with market rate units. We're trying to make that a little firmer so that it's very clear to the developer what that means and what that looks like moving forward. And then we're also proposing to remove discretionary review for single-family residential sites. So that's another component where that applies to existing subdivisions. Right now, we have a threshold where anything over 26,000 square feet of disturbance for a single-family site or anything over 7,500 square feet of gross floor area for a single-family site gets bumped up to our zoning administrator for additional reviews. So we're kind of putting a hard line on what that can look like on single-family lots, so that we're removing some subjectivity and discretion and providing clarity to future developers of those lots. Additionally, we're also creating a new permitting procedure so that we know how to process these Objective Design Standard permits. So if an applicant would like to go that path, they would apply for a streamlined residential permit. So that would be a second layer on top of a zoning clearance or a development permit. And then it'd be a staff level review, so that's where the ministerial part comes in. Staff would make sure all the checkboxes for all the design standards are met, and if they're not, we'll let them know what needs to be done to be consistent. And then they'll resubmit, and then we'd make sure it all applies, and then we'd bring it to Planning Commission to make sure we apply the design standards appropriately and to do any environmental review that's necessary for the project. So the next steps for this project, is to receive comments at this hearing. So seeing as how there's not much public comment here, we're here to hear what Planning Commission thinks. And we'll continue to receive public comments from both the public and commissioners if you so desire. And the deadline for potential incorporation into our design standards by staff in the next iteration would be July 9th, 2023. That'll give us a little more time to add that information, to synthesize comments and hopefully incorporate as appropriate within the draft language. So the town would work on, and the design workshop would work on those revisions, and then we'd return to Planning Commission on July 18th, so next month, for a hearing with that amended code language. You'd review that, we'd receive public comment, and we can incorporate changes based off of your recommendation and your review at that meeting, which would then be forwarded to the council for recommendation at their August 22nd meeting. For those watching from home, and I hope there are plenty, to if you haven't had a chance to review the document and the proposed language, you can go to our website at townoftruckee.com, type in the search engine, objective design standards, and the second item that pops up in the search would be where you'd go to see the objective design standards page. And within this page, our Planning Commission, I hope you are well familiar with this page, but this is where all of the draft objective design standards are, including all the language throughout the development code that we're proposing to update. And then there is a handout summary, and then there's a brief summary for each of the items that are outside of the objective design standards chapter that'll hopefully help you understand why we're doing the changes that we're proposing. So hopefully you can reference this website as you continue to review and provide comments to the staff. So as part of this, we have many questions. This is a complex topic. Design Workshop and and the staff have been working diligently on trying to address every component, but there are things that we're missing and things that we're hoping our Planning Commission and our community and our council will provide feedback on. We are not an island, and we hope that our community is engaged in this process. So some items that we've identified currently, and there's plenty other questions to consider, is if there's other wildfire mitigation that's needs to be incorporated into the project. Are there other materials that we have not identified, that new technologies that have not been incorporated into the the draft language? We have some experts on our Planning Commission, so I would like to hear from you, experts. Is there enough emphasis given to the public realm and supporting comfortable walking conditions within these areas where multifamily residential will be located? Do these regulations support and encourage flexibility to design while respecting existing look and feel of Truckee funk architecture? And I think we touched on it a little bit, but we are providing a pathway for applicants to forego the objective design standards and go a flexible design review path, so that it would be the same path that we go now, where there's more discussion with the applicants, there's more iterative design. Rather than saying, hey, you didn't meet this one item, you need to check this box before we can move it forward. There'd be more discussion, more community input, more engagement on that flexible design review path. Other items to consider: should certain types of recreation amenities be required, or should some be taken out? Should there be more standards for a low-impact design and sustainability? Are there terms that need defining? Are there things that we haven't yet objectively defined within this code? And then are there things that are just too much, and should we pare back some of our standards, or should we add more items to our standards to make sure that it is reflecting what our community wants? So with that, I turn it over to you. You can ask questions. This is an open discussion with staff. There is no public here, but you would have to open it up for public comment just to see if there's anyone who wants to give public comment.
So first it would be clarifying questions and then public, correct?
Yes.
So I know I have a few that I reviewed over the weekend. Coral, how about if we start with you? I'm sure you have some questions.
I have a couple questions, and they may have been. First one is related to some definitions, because I saw some words I didn't know, and they may be defined elsewhere in the code that I haven't read yet. I don't know what podium parking is. I don't know what a crusher screen is. You guys probably all know that. And then in terms of questions, well, some of my questions are related to some of the questions you've asked us, so I'll hold those off. And then a big one, not a big one, but do we actually need to talk about car elevators in this town?
We have received some applicant requests for car elevators.
Okay, so maybe we do. Okay. And then a question about, let's see, setbacks on page 4. No, I think I answered that for myself during the presentation. Those are just the quick clarifying questions. Again, I have some questions related to the ones you've asked. So.
Dave?
Yeah, okay, so just a couple questions off the presentation that we saw there. One thing that jumped out at me, what was the garage height? It said 12 foot. Is that plate height, or what is the 12 foot?
That's just to the top of the ridge, the highest point of the garage at the front of the building. At the
That seems ridiculously low
okay.
to me. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, if you have a 10-foot plate height in a garage.
Well, if you had some kind of recreational vehicle,
I don't even think a recreational vehicle. I mean, you put an SUV and you put a rocket box on it for the top of your skis, you're not going to get an 8-foot garage door.
No.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like a regular vehicle for a town of Truckee.
And if you're talking 12 foot to the ridge.
Yeah, then you're not going to be shedding any snow. I mean, it's like,
But that would depend on the slope, which I have a question about. But.
Right, and then I have a question on the slopes too. So, if we're talking about banning construction on a slope greater than 30 degrees, is that on parcels that are newly formed in subdivisions, or does that affect however many lots in Tahoe-Donner that aren't built on?
So it would not impact single-family subdivision, existing single-family subdivision. So a single-family home.
So a
on
new
Tahoe-Donner.
subdivision.
But if a subdivision went into a multifamily parcel in Tahoe-Donner, it would impact that.
Yeah, I don't think it's multifamily.
It
on
would
a
just
30
impact the
degree
component.
slope, but okay. And then is this our only shot at this, to take a look at this, or we're going to have a chance to go back through this again before?
You'll see this again next month, hopefully.
Okay.
And you have time throughout to send questions
Right.
and typos and
Got it. Okay. And then can you go back to the first screen, or one of the very first screens? It had a bunch of circle images, and we talked about what some of the community wanted to. Boom, boom, boom. Nope, one more back. Okay, yes. This second one, where is that covered?
Dave, that's in doing in a subdivision with more than 31 homes, doing 10 different variations.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing in this objective that helps affordability. Zero. I was shocked to see that.
Yeah.
And listed.
Yeah.
Everything listed increases the cost of construction.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, so I think this should be removed. That's all I have for now.
Do you think it should be removed as one of the described objectives when this is presented? Because it's
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, if there's no efforts made to figure out how to make things less expensive, then why even acknowledge it? I mean,
I sent Yumi a couple of questions and a whole list of comments in the document for her and the team to review. So thanks for receiving that. But I guess I'll just go through some of the more high-level questions that I had. First, I asked if an architect had designed a test fit of these standards to see if they could, one, understand them, and two, if they were objective and clear. And then I think the answer was no, one hadn't done kind of a test fit for this. I think that would probably be a really informative exercise just in seeing how far we've come in defining these standards. Also, I think, and this I think comes up mainly related to a lot of the parking, and also again maybe related to affordability, is if any cost or feasibility standards studies have been conducted. I know, parking structures and garages, especially if we're looking at subterranean parking, can be really expensive. And with our kind of small density or low density, I mean, even our high density areas are pretty low density in the grand scheme of things, if that even pencils in Truckee. Like if a developer can conform to these standards, build parking the way that they need to, only having 24 dwelling units per acre in our high density areas, if they can do it and make the project cost effective. I think that might be worthwhile to look into. You also may just be able to get some anecdotal evidence from talking to developers in town or architects or even contractors who may be more familiar with that kind of site design and layout and parking requirements. Second, or I guess third, I think there needs to be more clarity around how some of these standards that are asking for different things are inclusive or exclusive of each other, how they layer onto each other. Especially related to massing and articulation, you may be asking for a couple different things, but we need to better understand how they fit together and how they can build off of each other and what's allowed and what's not. I think there needs to be a bit more clarity there. Let's see, a couple of other ththings at the high level is, let me just go through my notes here. There were some things that are defined based on number of units, which I feel are better fit to be defined by or classified by building type. So whether it's a duplex, whether it's townhomes, so like attached single family, or a higher unit count multifamily building. And I've noted some examples of that in the document itself, where that might be better articulated. Yeah, and then I guess we can come back to this later when we have our more robust discussion, but I do have sustainability and energy efficiency questions and maybe some suggestions.
Thank you, Sammy. Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, just a couple kind of comments, questions. Some stuff that didn't make a lot of sense to me or I didn't totally understand. Like on page 28, it talks about a minimum storage capacity and it being 60 square feet and it has to be at least 6 feet in each direction. And I'm like, do we really need to dictate the size of a closet? And is a 6 foot by 6 foot closet necessarily the right size? And that going to constrict a developer on how they lay out a building? Me, actually, that's kind of a funny shaped closet. The building variety one in the new single family subdivision and specifically as it relates to affordability. I'm doing a project now, it's 40 townhomes. We have 3 variations and then 12 different colors when you cross the different colors. If you took that same project and now created 40 units where you had to have 10 different designs, affordability is out the window. There's no economies of scale, and now you're building every single unit as a custom unit, which is fine if you're going to go do that project on parcel F in Gray's Crossing. That's now going to be a bunch of high-end homes, but if we're talking about creating affordable housing, this is not going the right direction. I didn't understand some of these things with the downtown. Let's see, page 33. What's up really quick? In the residential mixed-use development standards, how we have a minimum of 2 units per acre and a maximum of 4 units per acre. And again, how does that conflict? It does make a note here about workforce housing, but that seems like if you're talking a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 units per acre, that's not a huge range. I was just a little bit unclear on how that would actually pencil out on a development. And then I was confused on the downtown visitor lodging zoning on the very end of this document about high-density multifamily residential projects in the DVL zoning area. And from what I could tell, the only DVL zoning parcel in the entire town of Truckee is Coburn Crossing, which why are we even creating a rule on a project that's already developed?
That's an existing rule, so we haven't changed it. We're just carrying it forward.
Got it. So do we know in here what is existing and what is changed?
For the objective design standards, I think we said all of it was new, but I believe that section is the only remaining.
Can we get a red line? I mean, if it's 100% new, is it possible to get a redlined version just so we know what? It sounds like it's not all new, right?
Aside from that section of the objective design standards, that's everything else is new.
Okay. So there you go, just a couple high level.
Thank you. So I just wrote some notes down for the presentation.
Sorry, I had one more.
Go ahead.
The maximum multifamily residential unit size, it's going to be a maximum average residential gross floor area shall be 1,000 square feet. I wasn't exactly sure how that was calculated. And what is the purpose of that? I mean, that is really pigeonholing us into studios, 1-bedrooms and 2-bedroom units, and no 3- and 4-bedroom units. You can do a 2-bedroom unit that's like 950 square feet. That's nice. It's not amazing. It'd be nice to be a little bigger. And so I'm just curious what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? Why are we putting that max 1,000 square foot for a multifamily?
So I had a few just off of the presentation comments. I don't know if they need to be answered right now, but first off, I wanted to start with 150 participants. There are how many people in the town of Truckee?
16,000.
15,000, right? So 150 is 1% of the population have dictated this whole thing. So I just want to throw that out there. That's it. It brings up gambrels and A-frames as a realtor. Gambrels and A-frames are junk. People don't want them. I'm not even sure why we're bringing that up. If you're looking for character, that's not it. I also saw something about buildings need to be parallel to the front line. That would negate any kind of possible solar gain by cocking your house one direction or the other. So I was kind of surprised at that, since we're trying to be solar based. I'm not even, view was how I started my business. Now it's more solar gain is really what we look for. So I was kind of surprised at that. There was also something about you have to have at least one tree at an entryway, but it doesn't specify if you got a 5-foot setback and you're putting a tree in 5 feet from the structure, you just killed off probably your insurance, but also pissed off the fire department because they're trying to get us away from any vegetation within 5 feet of a house, period. So it doesn't really give that flexibility. I think I know the answer to this next one, but there was a flexibility if the project's super huge to come to the planning commission. I'm not sure why that wouldn't be offered to anybody. Why does it have to be a big project? Not that I want to take on any more work, because I don't, but I'm trying to be fair. So those are my comments just from the presentation. Oh, and 45-foot deep house max. That would eliminate my Tahoe tunnel, which is probably the only affordable new construction. And so I know it doesn't affect Tahoe Donner. I get
What's
that.
What's the depth of yours?
56.
56? 45 feet without a break in plane, I thought. Or no, that was the frontage.
I thought I saw 45-foot depth, period, is what I thought I saw in the presentation. So those are, and again, the affordability, to call this affordable is
well, I mean, I don't think, yeah, the affordability thing is just,
you can't create rules and expect it to be affordable. It needs to be the other way around.
I think so that was a question we asked in our community survey. We also asked to our focus group whether or not you would want to see different standards for affordable housing. And they said they didn't want to see markedly different housing for affordable units specifically. So it's kind of a balance we're trying to find. Affordable housing projects also have the option for density bonuses, and they're allowed to relax our standards through that process as well.
We do want housing to be affordable, but we don't necessarily want barracks in town. There are maybe some subset of the standards shown here that can be added, whether it's just the eyebrow over the entryway or an entryway feature that's a variation on what is shown here, perhaps as a bonus, maybe. So you're saying those are the reduction of outdoor space, like we saw in the thing for Soaring Ranch last time. Those are the types of things that you would possibly trade for a density bonus that might make something more affordable?
Yes, under the current density bonus standards, we can definitely, they can relax up to, I think, 5 or 4 of the standards, and that includes the outdoor space like you saw with the Soaring Ranch. There's also potential with the general plan update, with implementation of the new general plan, that will be creating the town density bonus program, which will be specific to what kind of housing that our community wants to see, and that's an avenue where we can find pathways where we can relax some of these standards specific to those projects.
Like luxury affordable.
Well, so 150 people answered out of 15,000 that live here, and that's because the other 14,850 are busy working, don't know that these exist, and it doesn't mean that they don't care, and that's why I bring it up. It's not that they don't care. They elect their officials and rely on those elected officials to appoint people and a staff to represent their them, yes. But I get it. We need to have some input, but I need to, again, 1% of the people is not a large amount of people.
So I think I was one of those 150, I think.
That doesn't count then.
No,
So now it's 149. And
but I don't also get, I know that the consultants have gone through a process here of reviewing other development standards. So I wouldn't say that those 149 people dictated what's in here. They informed what was in here because they're talking about how do all the objective development standards elsewhere, how can they how can we mesh those together for something, and then maybe it was informed by the type of style and materials that people here want to see, and overall feel.
And I would say that the basis of this, the objective design standards, are based in our design guidelines, which has been a community document for since the 90s.
It's just hard for me when I hear A-frames. So, all right. So I'm going to go to opening public comment. So I don't know if the chairs have anything to say to us. So I'm going to open public comment. Well, we got a whole nother section of discussion. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. We could either take a short break if you all want to before we move into discussion, or just move straight into it. Commission discussion feedback on draft language. I guess we're just going to move right into it. So, Coral, you seem super energetic. Why don't you go first?
Energetic, but I'm going to say just a couple things about the language in general of this section. But then it would be helpful, I think, for me, at least, to see your list of questions that you wanted us to answer. In general, so this is one of the things that this is supposed to do, is give clarity to people that are trying to meet the standards. They're supposed to be objective. They're supposed to be clear. And just in terms of the language of this section, there are a couple of general things I would suggest to make it. This is an opportunity. It's like a brand new section. This is an opportunity to make progress in terms of the language of the development code. And maybe there's legal reasons to do these things, but make it less antiquated. Let's say things will or must be instead of shall be. There's no reason to use the word shall. It's not, I don't even think it's grammatically appropriate. I think you're supposed to use that as for a first person, for a human. And I don't know why development codes contain it. I suggest pulling it out. In terms of clarity, language like at least or minimum or maximum is a lot easier to interpret than shall be not less than. It's like, what, you have to okay, let me, calculate in cipher. Now I know it needs to be at least 4 feet. Just say at least 4 feet. It's really clear, simple
Coral, do
language.
we want to change, it's pretty common to say shall be not less than. Most documents say that.
It's a global search and replace to will. That's all it is. Takes 10 seconds, even less. So I would just advocate simplifying the language, bringing it up to the modern day. And then another thing that probably makes it easier for people trying to interpret this and meet it is if anytime you have a unit, feet, inches, miles, you use numerals, because those pop out of the paragraphs. If I'm looking for how many feet of a facade need to be broken up, or a height, I want to see the numeral 8, not EIGHT. It makes it so much easier to find. It's just a suggestion. I know it's not done through the rest of it. According to your style guide, apparently it's less than 10, or 10 or fewer are spelled out. I just think it'll be easier for people to try to meet this if you use numerals with units. For countable items, the spell outs are fine. Those are just ways I think it can be more accessible to users. Okay, so here's your questions. Thank you.
Is there a legality with that? So when I'm writing a real estate contract, it's 10%, and then I write 10% as a numeral with the percent sign, and then I actually write 10%.
I think that's a contract. Oh, and by the way, you might as well make the word use of the percent sign and the use of the word percent consistent in this chapter. Sorry, but
oh my God, I opened another door.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just a contract thing, but we don't do the dual spell out and thing elsewhere in this code generally. I don't think, but I know in contracts you often see that. Yeah. I'll start on the second one here, because I think you guys know a lot more about the first one, and Sammy knows a lot more about the sustainable types of materials. But the emphasis given to the public realm and supporting comfortable walking conditions, I noticed there's an emphasis on circulation throughout large multiplexes and then connection to the outer world. There isn't, it's pretty simple. You just say it has to be connected. I believe something like every 200 feet there has to be a connection. Are you looking for more to, how much could you dictate in here off-site as far as the connection to the outer world? Can't see that where you could do that. Is there an idea that you have been considering there?
No, I think this is more in terms of the street frontage and the pedestrian realm there, where someone's walking on the public sidewalk. We have talked about how this would attach, how multifamily residential projects would connect to our sidewalk infrastructure, but that's a conversation we need to have with engineering on how that works with their requirements.
I can't say that I saw a place in here to put that. Was there a spot in here where you said that any, one of the multi-subdivisions had to have an circumnavigating sidewalk on it? Was that in here?
Kelly, do you know?
There is not a specific requirement for a circumnavigating sidewalk, no.
I don't know if that's a real word or not. Thank you for responding that way. That might be one place that you could say is that anyone like this thing here maybe has to have a, if you wanted to say connected better to the public realm, it would have to have a sidewalk all the way around it, or at least more. Since I'm big for the walking, so I don't know if that's something you want to put in there, or if that makes it too difficult to build a big multifamily unit thing. That's 6 buildings. Does that just make
More requirements.
More requirements, more money.
More money, flat out.
I'd like to add on to that. I mean, I think there is a gross lack of sidewalks here, and if we have the potential to require that as part of new projects, that would be really helpful, I think, because a lot of people walk around here and we're walking on the street, and it's definitely not the safest situation. So I would agree with something related to a sidewalk requirement, and it could be based on, for multifamily projects or for new subdivisions. I think it could fit for both. But related to that, also the diagram that you just pointed out, Coral, the one with the parking in the center and the multifamily around, that is a very confusing diagram to me. I can't picture a real multifamily development that looks like that, whereas the diagram that you showed in the presentation, I think illustrates what you're trying to, the same concept in a much clearer way, where you're keeping contiguous open space, you have parking behind, and then you have clustering of the buildings. I don't know which slide it was, but I think maybe replacing those two diagrams would be a really valuable way. Yes, this one, where you have the clustering of the buildings, the open space intact, and then the parking coming in behind versus the parking in the middle and the kind of split up open space, which isn't what we want. Based on reading this, I think this would be a much more informative diagram. Just on that note. And I know that one, the one with the parking in the middle, is used kind of multiple times. So maybe updating that would be a bit helpful.
That one is showing from entrance from the front. This is showing entrance from the side.
But it's on the front street?
Yeah, but the entrance to the parking lot's coming off of the side
yes.
street, and the other ones you guys are talking about has the entrance to the parking lot coming from.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, so maybe we need to incorporate this one, because I don't remember seeing this particular diagram in the document, but I'm assuming it must be somewhere, and I just missed it because it's in the presentation. But I think just being a bit more clear about our use of these diagrams to illustrate what we are actually asking for, or what we'd actually like to see, versus just something that fits the language. And that's, again, goes back to my point of making sure that it's clear what what is wanted by this language, not just language that exists to define concepts. Although we do want to leave it open for interpretation and flexibility, I do understand that. But I don't think we want to see parking in the middle interrupting open spaces and kind of disjointing our developments. But that's just another kind of a side note. We can go back to the questions, sorry.
So I think what we should do then is go through the questions one commissioner at a time maybe take a break at that point and then come back with whatever notes we all have from reading. Does that work for everybody? So you have these 5 questions that are in front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 questions that are in front of us right now from Yumi. So if all the 5 commissioners answer those questions one at a time or together, take a breather.
I think we could just go through those together.
Okay. Dan, is that enough discussion on, is enough emphasis given to the public realm? Dan, Dave?
I guess I'm still unclear on what the goal is for tonight if we're going to see this again next month.
You're going to see this again next month.
So I guess I'm still unclear of what the goal is for tonight.
It's to give us some preliminary feedback so that we can make changes based off of your current feelings about or your current review of the standards, draft standards.
And then next month's the last time that we're going to have an opportunity to review it?
For this iteration.
For
That's
this
what
iteration.
we're
And when's the next iteration?
We're going to see how the standards play out in the community, and then if we find that there are some issues that we encounter, we can always bring it back. Or if council decides that they want to initiate another wholesale update, then they would initiate that.
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, the purpose of this really was a workshop setting so that you had an introduction and didn't feel the pressure to make all your formalized recommendations. It's
Got it.
more to ask questions fluidly, be able to talk amongst yourselves.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
So the next meeting is to vote on this?
Yes.
With whatever recommendations we might have then?
Yes.
But we'll see a revised version in between.
Yes, and you can send me comments now, and we can have discussions between now and then, and
It seems like that might be, we might end up, if there's a revised version or if there's some things that, some of us want to ponder, is it appropriate for us to have a
When it comes up in
email
front
on
of
this?
us next month, you can always postpone it too. You don't have to vote. We're going to be asked to vote on it, but if it's not clear for you, you're not comfortable voting for it at that point, you can postpone it.
Yes, that's our purview.
Right.
Yeah.
So, again, we've been discussing is enough emphasis given to the public realm and supporting comfortable walking conditions. Dan, Dave, you guys haven't spoken up.
I mean, that's a pretty broad question.
No kidding.
Like we talk about sidewalks, for instance. I think we approved a project up in Tahoe, Donner. It was a commercial building on Zurich, right?
That's right.
And there's a requirement to put sidewalks in front of there. Well, there's neither sidewalks on either side of the property. So now they're required to put a sidewalk that goes in front of their new project that they're not building. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So we're like, does that meet this intent to give an emphasis to support comfortable walking conditions? And, it's like some of this stuff with the multifamily projects where they want to create sidewalks, like, sure, sidewalks are great, but they got to go somewhere. There's got to be some thought behind them. And, like, yeah, we don't have enough sidewalks in town, but look what's happening in West River Street. We're going to get awesome sidewalks and more parking. Like, that's happening. It's taking a long time.
Not more parking, it's different parking.
I thought
There's more parking, too.
I thought the Legacy Trail was what we did for walking. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's a pedestrian access. It goes all over town, connecting all the communities, right?
And so I think it's a good question. I think if we want to unpack it further and look at every single one of these situations, if we want to go down that path, I'm not suggesting
No.
we do.
No, I don't think we want to do that. We're looking for broad to help for objective design standards, not to
So
go
you're looking
over.
for a yes or no answer to this question?
I
Is
didn't
enough
ask the
emphasis
question.
given? Oh.
I'm just asking for your opinion on this question. So if your opinion is yes, it's fine, or no, it's not?
Well, I just think it's a very, very broad question that's dealing with how many different types of sites. We have a mixed use, we have a multifamily, we have, how many different types of sites are in here? 3. Mixed use, multifamily, single family.
New subdivisions.
Like, are sidewalks going to be required in, again, to go back to Gray's Crossing, parcel F, that they have the sign up there they're going to develop? Is that going to have sidewalks?
That's part of an existing subdivision, right? So it would not
No, that's a
be-
new subdivision, isn't it? That parcel? Pretty sure.
Then yeah.
So they're going to now put sidewalks within there. There are obviously some within Gray's Crossing, but just on the main road.
Wouldn't that fall under the Gray specific plan?
so we're getting very specific on the sidewalk question. Right now, the code, our development standards don't have a specific sidewalk standard. The PIEs is generally what determines, which is the engineering standards, determines when we put frontage improvements on a project. If you want to put in sidewalk requirements, we can. We just need to make sure that they're objective and to the projects that you want to see. There's potential that we could look at specific front roads, like Donner Pass Road from Coldstream to Frady's. Maybe that's what your interests are. I mean, we're getting sidewalks we already have sidewalks for the majority of that stretch, but if there's other areas that you want to ensure that there are sidewalks, we can create those objective design standards. If you're okay with how it's currently being processed through the engineering division, then we can just defer to the engineering division on our sidewalks. If you want to talk about internal circulation within the multifamily projects, that's something that can be part of this objective design standards. This is a good example of the challenge of this objective design standard process. To Commissioner Freeman's point, yes, there are always going to be little variances or projects that are out there that maybe shouldn't have the standard applied if we had the ability to review it on a case-by-case basis. The state has taken that away from us in some instances. There are options for for developers to opt either to do density bonuses to get some waivers, or to potentially in the future the town density bonus to get housing that of a type that we want to see as a community. Or they can go the flexible design review path where they can work with the town to determine what's exactly what fits for their project and what the community expects for that site.
So in my mind, I think engineering is doing a good job of dictating where we do need sidewalks for projects.
Except for the one that has sidewalk going to nowhere on Zurich.
Yeah. I just don't know if we want to go street by street in this town.
I don't think so. And the question is comfortable walking conditions, not necessarily sidewalks, within what we were reviewing, what was presented to us tonight.
I mean, I think then if that's the case, where a sidewalk requirement fit would be a new subdivision. So we don't end up in the place where we are, where we have sidewalks that would connect to nothing and sidewalks that don't exist, where we have a chance to actually put sidewalks in residential neighborhoods where people will use them.
I agree with that.
And that's what these standards apply to, is new subdivisions. So if there might be an opportunity to put something in about surrounding or a little bit more connection on the multifamilies, great. That's all I had to say about that.
All right. So I think we talked enough about sidewalks. Let's go to wildfire mitigation, since we're just going to do this as a group. So I'm going to kind of go down. So wildfire mitigation adequately addressed in these standards. Do you know of any fire-resistant materials or technologies that be encouraged or required, Dan?
I think we already have WUI in place.
Yep.
And are we going to now have more local standards that, are we going to require hardy siding? I think we don't want to touch that. I feel like we have enough legislature in place to handle that.
Yeah. And in here it talks about how wood is this remarkable material, and I wholeheartedly disagree.
Well, it comes from trees.
I know, but so if you had hardy backer, how often do you have to paint hardy backer? How often do you have to paint Trex? How often do you have to paint fake stone, real stone? How often do you have to paint wood? There's no comparison. It's the least of the, but that's my own opinion on it. What do you think?
I don't think that, I think WUI is adequate. I don't think we need to add on top of that. My opinion on these devastating wildfires are not how we build the buildings, it's how we manage the forests. So I don't think we need to, compile onto it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
There is a lot of defensible space work happening on a massive scale right now, which is pretty cool to see. So I would agree with that.
So the only thing I would say is technologies change as times change and as we move through the calendar, and we just want to be open to that. I don't know how you could fit that into an objective design standard, but it's something that, in 10 years from now, there's going to be all different products out there for sure. So, okay, do these regulations support or encourage enough flexibility to design while respecting existing look and feel of Truckee funk architecture? For me, the more regulations you come up with, the more everything looks the same. If you're being told you have to, every 12 feet, you have to have a window, and you have to do architectural relief in this section, and you can only have a 6 and 12 pitch roof, and eventually everything looks the same. So My answer to me personally, do these regulations support and encourage enough flexibility? No. But I don't think you can if you need to be objective. How do you do that?
It seems like there was stuff in here that said, for things like the articulation on the facades. I don't remember. There's been a lot of reading, but it seemed like there were flexibility of, is it 8 to 12 feet, or there's ranges for some of them, and I don't know if that gives architects and builders enough flexibility to have that range. But it seemed like there was some flexibility built in, but I can't answer that from the.
I mean, I would say that Chair Claren's question is the $1 million question that we have asked ourselves a lot. But to his point, we have lost a lot of that ability, and that's the only way we can do the objective design standards is to put some rigidity in place, unfortunately. We did try to build in some flexibility to Commissioner Kavanaugh's point. We tried to look at proportions and percentages over strict dimensions. But if there's other ideas or other areas where we can incorporate that type of language instead of dimensions or numbers, or there's ranges or more quantities of options to incorporate, we're happy to incorporate them.
So it says something about you have to have 2 types of siding. Is that a minimum or is that a maximum? I don't remember. I think it just said 2, which to me means you can only have 2, not less, not more.
Callie, do you remember the exact language?
Let me find that section. Give me just a moment.
There was a minimum 2 high quality, climate appropriate, and fire resistant materials.
So that's not just siding, but other types of materiality on the structure.
Yeah, so my notes have wood is not a long-term weathering material at all. I'm kind of stuck on that. And then it said something about stucco and then brick only in downtown. Why is that? So you're talking about flexibility and then you're limiting the products you can use. Brick is historic and completely fire safe. So is stucco for that matter. So I'm confused on why that's even called out.
Well, the brick we allowed in the downtown Truckee because it is something we see in our downtown Truckee. We don't typically see that elsewhere in our community, but if it's something you think is appropriate elsewhere outside of downtown, we can incorporate that.
Well, it's just that things change, right? So, years ago, you wanted your structures to look very similar to itself. And now most of the architects are coming up with different sections of their homes. They're purposely making different areas look differently. So things change. So when we write things that are reflecting today's style, it doesn't get, again, there's no flexibility in changing for later. That's all.
And this examples materials list, it's pretty limited.
Shingles, who's using shingles anymore? I mean, it's even there.
Blue hot rolled steel is almost becoming not done that much anymore.
Yeah, it's a style thing. It's like, bell bottoms come, they go, then you've got straight legs and they come and go. And where does Trex fit into this? I didn't see that here at all. Trex type products for decks and things. That's allowed downtown right now.
Trex is not allowed downtown currently.
It's all over 1882.
The deck floor has been approved for 1882, but other than that, I don't believe it's been approved elsewhere.
I mean, Chair Clarence, to your point, I think we have the ability to modify these in the future. We recognize that trends change over time, that design aesthetic changes. I think what we're trying to do is put something in place today because that's what the state of California is telling us we need to do. There is no reason why, if in 5 years we find that some of these materials are no longer, cool and groovy and Truckee funk, then we can change that. Or if there's things we're missing out on that are then cool and groovy, we can include those. These are not a stagnant document. We fully recognize that there are going to be aspects of this that just don't work, and we are only going to find those as we start implementing these.
Will applicants be able to come in and request a variance?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially through the flexible approach that Yumi talked about earlier, where if someone doesn't want to adhere to the more rigid standards that we have, there is an option they can pursue. It just means that it's not in kind of the streamlined pathway that is mandated under the objective design standards.
And would they be able to do that at the staff level, or would it have to come to us?
It would depend on the permit type that they need, correct?
So it'd be similar to, or it'd be exactly like it is today. So projects that are smaller, less than 11 residential units, that's approved, reviewed at the staff level unless there's another permit that layers on top that makes it more discretionary.
So, and speaking of that, Yumi, if somebody wanted to go around these objective and not be streamlined in their smaller than 11, is it possible to do that?
Yes. I mean, that's what we do, right? Typically, before the subjective design standards, these requirements came into place, we did it at the staff level. We discussed design guidelines rather than standards, and we talked with the architects or the designers of their projects to come up with iterative. Had an iterative process where there's projects that if you tweak this, then we think it'll look good.
And so Trex would be a non-allowable material, according to this?
I don't know if it's exactly a prohibited material. We do allow for fiber cement, so there is potential that we could include specifically Trex for decking.
Well, let's get away from the word Trex because that's a brand name. So I think we should just be talking about composite decking.
Composite decking.
Sure. For composite decking, we can create specific allowances for that type of material. If there's specific locations you want to see them in rather than other locations, we can also identify that within the code.
I would maybe just add that the materials section is related to exterior cladding, not really speaking to decking and fence materials, for instance. So there is a differentiation for that, and if we need to make that clearer, we can definitely do that. But the idea is that a Trex-like material is not appropriate as the cladding for a building.
So not as a vertical surface, but it would be okay as a horizontal surface?
Correct.
I think it should say that.
I think that
more clear.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but it should say that. That's why I asked it. It didn't mention it, so how did it fit in? That was it. And I again, it says additions under materials 18.25.080, number 5, additions, use only materials found in the existing structure. Architecturally, right now, people are purposely designing to not do that. So I'm not sure why that we put that in. And then, I don't know, are we going into the deepness here? Because 18.25020, applicability, B, 15% additions of square foot have to follow these new rules instead of 30% or something. 15% on a 2,000 square foot is 300 square feet. That's a master bedroom. It's a really small amount to kick off. That's all right. I'm bringing up two things. I'm sorry.
Chair?
Yes.
You want to go back to those questions? Just at least
we did change it off of that, huh?
Pick those off, and then if I could make a suggestion, I think that maybe if we just kind of go through everything that we're ready to go through now, and then,
All right, my original suggestion was to go through the questions, and I veered off, so I'm sorry. So let's stick with the questions. So is wildfire mitigation adequately addressed in these standards? WUI does that for us would be the answer to that. Is that okay with everybody, Sammy?
Yes, that's fine with me.
We already did number 2. Number 3, support, encourage enough flexibility. We kind of already covered that.
And what are we saying? No?
No. It's objectivity and flexibility really don't go together. I'm not sure how you could even do that. Wasn't that the $1 million question?
Yeah, but I think that staff made it clear that they're just trying to comply with state law.
I get that,
and that there is a way for applicants to come in and then request a variance at the staff level, depending on the permit type.
So then the answer is yes.
Within the realm of the objective design standards, you can also create more options within each component, create a little more flexibility for people to choose which option they want to use if we're trying to avoid all buildings looking exactly the same with the same balcony on every building. So it's up to you whether or not you want to explore that option. It is a tedious process.
I think we're trying to put a minimum standard in place, but not limit the maximum standard. So if you get some architect who wants to try and, break the rules and shake things up a little bit, I mean, I've literally seen horizontal materials put vertically had to be a huge battle between design review committees and architects, and the architects won. They basically said, we're cool, and this is groundbreaking, and this is what we want to do. Not that we're going to put Trex on as siding, but how far until Trex makes a
siding
product?
Which they probably will.
Probably already do.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
That looks cool and awesome and actually would be a good fit. And so, or
Well, we
like
used
if
to
we
do-
say composite, are we talking about any composite siding product?
I don't know, are we? What's the future hold?
Composites.
No one knows, Mitch.
I know.
No one
That's
knows.
Well, I mean, so cement siding, which is allowed, that's a composite, right? I mean, cement's made up of several different materials.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes. Plywood, that's a composite, made up of different layers of wood. Yeah.
Cement is an ingredient in concrete, if you're going to get technical. Cement is
Cement is
the
powder.
is the
Well, okay,
glue
so-
that holds the aggregate together to make concrete. All right.
not a composite.
Well, cementitious.
Cementitious material. There you go. All right. But to answer the question in front of us, it
I
sounds.
think they're saying no. I think they're saying no. Aren't you guys saying no?
I'm saying no. I'm hearing yes.
I'm
from
saying
the
no,
other
but
two
also like let's make it. How do we get to a yes? The Truckee way. So if we're gonna say no, let's unpack that and go through. I don't really want to get into like the articulation offsets of buildings and be the. I'm not an architect, so I guess we just want to think. What are we trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, not everybody knows that they could ask to get around the rules to a variance. So some people are strictly, they read the rules and that's what they do, and they don't know that there's a.
But maybe that's okay. For those that don't ask, then they should follow the rules.
It'll be faster for them.
And faster
Yeah.
for staff.
Yeah.
Do we just get to a yes?
It sounds like it. Should certain types of recreation amenities be required? If so, which?
No.
Casino in every development. No, I don't think they. I think they offer you the guideline or the standards here offer some examples, but they don't dictate, and I don't think they should.
I agree. Amy agrees, I heard.
I agree.
Dave?
Yes.
Dan?
Yeah, less requirements.
Should there be more standards for low impact design and sustainability?
I guess for this one, I just have a question for staff, and you may not be able to answer this now. I mean, I don't think you can. But I also, I feel like a building needs to be designed and modeled with the energy code, the current version of the energy code, to see if it can meet compliance standards. Just because now we have solar requirements for multifamily, which we didn't have, especially, well, for low-rise and mid-rise. And if we're disallowing some different sort of orientations of buildings, making sure that we can still be in compliance with the energy code, I think is really important. There are other avenues to take to get to that efficiency, but I think we just need to know, especially when we're talking about fenestration too, with the windows, because there are some pretty strict requirements in the energy code now related to windows. So just knowing that we can be in compliance, or a prototypical building can be in compliance with the energy code, would be really important. Other than that, the things that I noticed the most was if we're talking about flat roofs in certain capacities, having, a defined SRI value for that roofing product would be, I think, a really, affordable win in terms of sustainability, especially since we're trending towards those dark colors. Those earth tone dark colors for roofing materials. There's also SRI coatings that increase reflectance on roofs that would decrease heat retention, things like that. But generally, I think just getting that energy code question answered would be key.
We do have Title 24, which is the most stringent energy compliance standards in the country. And so again, like what are we trying to, if we're looking for standards for low impact design and sustainability, there's a lot of standards in place that are going to be required.
Oh yeah, anything built with the new code, the new 2022 energy code in Title 24 is excellent.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to go beyond. I mean, they're so efficient, these new buildings. There's nothing you can really ask for that's in excess of what's already being asked for in terms of code. In terms of low impact development, the state has requirements for that. I also don't think we really need to go beyond that in a blanket sense. In certain sites, perhaps that would be necessary. But if you're also revising wetlands and all these other parts of the development code, I think that can be addressed kind of on that term.
Well said. Anybody have anything to add to that?
No.
Coral? Did that help?
I would say that we did a design workshop and staff looked at solar orientation as a standard within our code. We had a hard time coming up with something that wouldn't turn out to be odd. I mean, it'd be great if there is expertise on the dais that could help us identify how to create a standard to meet, like, is there a study out there that we can require that would show us that this solar orientation is better than a parallel to the front property line orientation, and by how much, so that we can say that that is a greater benefit to the design than having a parallel frontage on the
Well, you could
front
do that
property
right
line.
now. So when my last few houses that I built, I would give to Bender. He was my solar an analyst, and make sure before we even designed it, make sure that it had the proper solar gain on it. So we would here's the house that we want to build on this lot. Here's the lot. Here's where we'd like to put it. But do we have to tilt it 5 degrees or 10 degrees to get a better gain? So I was already doing it. I mean, we were purposely placing it to get the gain.
Okay.
So
So having an energy consultant provide feedback on, or provide a study showing the two different orientations?
Well, no. Then you're just adding more money.
Yeah. What I'm saying is they're already doing it, or they already can do it if that's the way they're approached.
Can we have time to research that a little bit?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
we can do that as well on our end.
Is there any room in the whole roof section? Because I noticed there's, you have to have different types of roof and articulation in the roof and things like that. Is there any way to incorporate it in there somewhere? I mean, it would be kind of odd to just have it oriented one way and then have, here's a section of roof that just faces or to have a big rack up there.
For me, every house being parallel to the street within 10 feet, I mean, that's the suburbs.
awful.
That's what I moved away from.
No, but in an urban setting, it creates a nice uniform streetscape and a sense of place. I think that's what the standards, I think they're trying to get to on that one.
Well, not for a new single-family subdivision.
Yeah, it's just homogenized Americana, and it just looks like crap.
Not something that looks like the suburbs, something that looks like
Well,
a
but
more
that's what this
urban
is
setting
dictating.
where they're townhouses and things.
If you got to do a new subdivision and every house has to be parallel to the front, regardless of solar gain, that's going to look like a suburb, Coral. There's no other ways around it.
I just bought a lot on a street where everything's lined up, identically facing the front of the street, and they're achieving something there. It depends on the scale. If you're talking about half-acre lots, orient them however you want. But if you're talking about something that's like 50 feet wide, if you're talking about a tight, higher density area, I think sometimes that kind of uniformity can give you a sense of place. If you're talking about the suburbs or someplace where things are really spread out, then you're going to end up with, anywhere USA, and we don't want that. I agree, we don't want that. And I agree that it's really important to be able to get decent solar exposure. So that's a really good question. How do you achieve what you're trying to achieve visually while getting the energy gain?
We could also create different requirements based off of the average size of the parcel, if it is a half acre versus a parcel with a 50-foot wide frontage. In a more urban setting, there could be different requirements in terms of where it's located, in terms of the front property line, or how it's oriented, maybe something on a larger acreage property. We don't care if it's oriented parallel to the property line.
If I was to use Taladana as a living example, right now, most of those lots are 70, 75 wide, 1/3 acres, and you can place the house wherever you want, and I think that adds character.
The streets aren't on a grid there, though. So, I mean, if the streets aren't on the grid, then the houses are going to be facing every which way because the streets at Tahoe Donner are all curved. So you're not creating this just,
We don't
But
have
they're not. It
anything where
goes-
the streets are on a grid.
I also want to remind our commission that there's only a very limited amount of land that's going to really include single-family residential subdivisions within our community, and even multifamily.
That's true.
We have very limited land. So if we're thinking about large acreage parcels, we don't have very many left, I don't think, if any. So consider the impacts of what we're discussing right now in terms of how if it would make an impact on our community or not. And if it's not, maybe that person, if it's one development in the future, we can take the flexible design path and work with that applicant.
Ironically, that actually orientating the houses in line and parallel to the street is probably the cheapest and easiest option and lowest common denominator, and actually orientating them some other way is probably more challenging and more expensive. And so, again, we're now putting a rule in place that a little bit drives the standard down. Like, why put anything in there? A developer's going to come in there and say, hey, this is the cheapest I can do. It's going to make them all straight in a line. If somebody wants to come and provide more interest, that's going to be it's more challenging and more expensive to do. But we are now not allowing that possibility by putting that in the design guidelines.
Yeah, it's an objectivity that doesn't really need to be
And
there.
so we're forcing a developer to go with straight, or we might want to give them the option to do something other than that.
Could I add maybe just one piece for this? There is a difference in the building orientation requirements for new single-family subdivisions versus new multifamily development. For new single-family subdivisions, the orientation requirement is 10% of the front facade should be parallel to the front setback line, so that there's a gesture to kind of an orientation to the street, but that the rest of the building could be oriented in any way that made sense for that developer. So it's not a full, building orientation and everything is going to be the same in those new single family subdivisions. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
How do you do that on a cul-de-sac?
It's a good question. We could add some information about how that measurement would be done, but typically it's kind of taking a tangent of the circle and partially orienting it to that.
We answer the question. Should there be more
I think
standards?
we need to move on. I mean, I think originally what we said was that the state laws, Sammy said really well, that the state laws already are dictating low impact and sustainability in a super high quality way, and I don't think we need any more than what the state's already requiring. Is that correct, Sammy?
Yeah, that's correct. I also think the town is working on other sustainability related building code options too. So I think we're covered here.
So no, there should not be more standards. Is that?
Yeah.
There's your answer.
You got there.
Okay. So after this, now I wanted to go through everybody. I know.
Wait, you got terms that need defining.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any terms that need defining?
There's one on page 18. It says it's actually an inappropriate material, but it says untreated, smooth, corrugated metal. I think smooth and corrugated can't be the same thing. Item E there.
I think we can refine that language.
I assume that if we have like really detailed comments about wording, we'll just send them to you.
Yes, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. So with next, I'll start with Sammy then. Sammy, we're going to get more into detail now. So what do you have?
I sent some written comments on the draft document to Yumi. I felt like that was just the easiest way to do it so as not to have to go through line by line tonight,
Thank you.
which I can do if you want, but I also think she can review them and the team can review them and see what's appropriate to adjust based on my comments.
And we can provide, I believe, the comments received to.
Oh yeah, feel free to. I guess I didn't know if I should share them or I sent them. Yeah, if
We'll
you
do
want
it
to
as
share them
part
with
of
all
a
the
broader.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Yumi will probably answer them and then send them out. Like she'll collect all our questions or whatever we send to her and send it out to all of us.
Dave? So I just got to go back to this 12-foot garage thing. I think that needs to be pulled out, and we could just walk through this really quickly. All right, so let's say you have an 8-foot garage door. Okay, then you're going to need 2 feet above that for the track and the mounting and everything, so now you're at 10 feet. Okay, so we're at a 10-foot plate height. Then let's say you're somewhere up in Tahoe Donner where you need a 24-inch glue lam beam for structure. Now you're at 12 feet. And then if you want to do a 6 and 12 gable on that, that's going to be, depending on how wide the garage is, 16, 18 feet tall. I think that 12 feet is just ridiculous.
Or any kind of second story living space above, how does that factored in?
It says here that a 1-story living space is permitted above the garages, but I just think that the 12 feet just needs to be just stricken out. And then, there's a bunch of other things in here, but I'm going to just go with what Sammy said, which was, we're going to give the notes to staff, and then we can go through this. They can come back with revisions, and then we can go through this and grind through it line item by line item at the next meeting. But does that...
Is it more efficient to do it somehow offline than, I don't, if we all have suggestions regarding, edits, specific edits, like you want to change a number here or there, it's like, I would love to see that. Is there a way, without taking too much of, especially all of your time?
So this has to go through, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to be at a noticed meeting, right? We're not supposed to be communicating amongst ourselves with more than one other commissioner to stay within the Brown Act, right? So I think typically what we do is we send it into staff redacts who it came from, and then distributes it.
Do we want to set a date to have that by so that staff has time to prepare that?
How about 5 p.m. before the next meeting, Thursday?
4 p.m.
4 p.m. before the next meeting, so they have the weekend to read it all.
Can we get a redlined version that has, so we could just literally then go page by page and see what our comments are? And
yes,
this is 34 pages. It's not 340.
Yeah. The only thing that does, though, is takes away the dialogue that we're having right now.
Well, but that's what the next meeting can be, Yeah. Is my thought.
I think now we have a little more clear direction on what the goal is. I can even see stuff in here like roof design. Up to 2 roof types per building shall be allowed. Well, I'm building houses that have 3 roof types all over the place, almost required, where you might have a low slope 1/4 and 12 or 1 and 12, a flat roof, and then some kind of steeper pitch with 3 different kinds of roofing products.
So I think, I totally agree with that. And I think that we're all going to look at this with, our own perspective, and we're all going to see things a little bit differently, and we're all going to add things to the document to make it better because of our own perspectives, right?
Yeah, because I saw a minimum of 4 and 12 and a maximum of 6 and 12 roof pitches, while almost every design used has a 12 and 12 pitch in every diagram used as an example.
Or lower a shed roof. That's a 1 and 12.
Yeah. Mine's
Which
a half and 12.
There isn't even that's not even put in here.
And why would you limit shed roofs with a minimum roof slope of 4 and a maximum of 6? Why is that even in there?
Because it has to be objective, right? But
Fine, but then are we going to call
have
it
to have
a 1 and 12 to 12 and 12? Or what if they want to do a 14 and 12?
And then why have examples in here? If there's an old style house in here, it's a 16 and 12 with a dormer roof in it. Even the diagrams that they use to explain how to build have steeper pitches than what they're calling out. So we can bring that stuff up.
I'm just looking for, for efficiency, like I can submit my comments on this coming week because I've looked at, I've marked it up and I don't know if
It's more efficient if we write them down and send them in and then they do it.
It totally is, but it's like we're just delaying their progress by not having done that already, I think is what I'm getting at. So is there any way we can set time frame for ourselves, or a goal for ourselves to get our comments in so that they can get them turned around and we have time to respond to the new version, because the new version will then need
Prior-
markup. And are we going to have are we going to discuss the edits to the new version, or are we going to discuss the edits to this version? Or both?
You mean if we
That's
all
two
got
meetings.
Yeah, if we all got you comments back, let's pretend it was tomorrow morning. How long does it take you to then generate an updated document and then we can re-review? I love Pearl's idea that now we come to the next meeting, we've already had a little dialogue offline via email.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about when we've done work like this in the past for other development code changes. Usually what we try and do is compile all of your changes to some degree in one document so you can see each other's comments first. Then we have to look at them and say, like, this would create some inconsistencies, or yes, this makes sense, and then highlight where we do want to make the changes in the next version, and then maybe call out why we didn't make those changes, because some of your ideas may not match up together also. So we kind of have to go through that effort. But it can take Yumi a couple weeks to do that. Yeah.
And if we saw this at our next meeting,
Yeah. I mean, we need a couple weeks
yeah,
for sure.
So it'd be like, it sounds like if we had comments back to you by end
This
of next
weekend.
week.
Yeah, I just don't want to create the expectation that, every single comment that you give us is going to be in the next version, because we have to go through and look at all 5 sets of comments and then figure out sort of what the objectives are that we're working on and where we can make those changes.
And theoretically too, we're not all going to provide comments on every single of the same items.
Yeah, I think we're going to be addressing a bunch of different sections for the most part.
Yeah, that was
so-
kind of my point, right? We would all.
Most probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 3 pages of chicken scratch, which is going to type out to maybe a page. The screens just went blank.
So now what are we doing? Share.
The screens just went blank. There we go. All right. So then, if we're going on this path, then we should all get our comments typed up and emailed to Yumi by I'd say this weekend, but that's by Monday morning at 9:00. Does that work?
That would be great. And like I said, I think our commitment on our side is to be able to compile those all into one document so you can see each other's ideas too.
So we're like rely on staff to get that back to us, so each one of us knows what the other one was saying.
I mean, we have to do it as part of the full packet that
Right.
we're putting out. We can't give them to you ahead of time,
Right.
but yeah.
Can we make that Tuesday, please? Or Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday.
There's a lot. There's a lot for me between now and then.
Me too.
Of other commitments
Yeah.
between now and then.
By Wednesday at 9:00.
As long as that's soon enough for staff, because I'll make it happen if it's okay.
Dan, can you make that happen?
I want to think about it again in
Tammy's
light of
already
what you
done it.
guys have said. There's what I thought when I read it, but as I've all said, I want to look at it again and things that.
Wednesday works for us, if that helps.
Okay. The only other thing I had was Windows, and it said
I got a
something.
question for you guys on Windows. It was like saying 15% of the facade. What was it? 15% of the facade should be windows, or more, or something like that. Is that what you normally see? I have no idea.
This is how you got Lahontan with a lot of houses that look the same. Is by having a lot of very, very specific rules.
It was
in place.
so rigid that,
This is exactly why in Marta's camp they got rid of all those rules and
Right.
said, go for it, figure it out.
Right. So in materials, I just want to bring this up. It said something about windows and no vinyl or composite, or vinyl and composite windows are prohibited.
In the historic district,
That was historic district only?
I believe so.
I didn't remember seeing that.
That's what it should be. We're typically,
All right, I'll re-review it and see if that's what it said.
we can confirm too. And
Yeah,
that's what our intention is.
that's great. Because even if you were doing wooden windows, they're all clad with something, vinyl.
Has an architect consultant gone through this, or do we have anybody, like a Brendan Riley?
He
who
said you
loves-
had,
Yes, we have a focus group of 5 architects and people who develop. They're all they're architects / developers
From where?
from here. from Truckee.
Okay. Do we know, is that,
Brendan's
Yeah,
one.
Brendan
Brendan's
Riley's one of them. David Tierman, Christy Thompson, David Burke, and I'm sorry to this person, I don't remember.
And
That meets my standard. Just when we have questions about like the roof articulation, more than 2 feet every 30 feet, someone else to chime in there.
David.
All right, well then, if that's the case, I think we're done with discussion on that item, correct? Everybody okay with that?
yes.
Staff, I'm seeing yes. Because I lost my screen again.
Yep.
10, staff reports. Any staff reports?
Just a very quick overview of what you'll be seeing next month. So as you are well aware, you'll have this back in front of you, discussion on, and hopefully a recommendation on objective design standards. We have a development review project for a car wash in Grace Crossing, and we potentially have an appeal of a code compliance case for your consideration. Don't know quite yet if that's moving forward, but we'll know pretty soon.
Scott Ryan.
We'll be here next month.
Thank you very much. Is there do you guys just have even a guess when we'll see Tahoe Donner again?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't guess if I was you guys. Commission member reports.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
It's not summer yet.
Jeez.
Then how about a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
We good? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain? No?